Maggie Walker never imagined that bidding on an old telescope would place her and her daughter in the crosshairs of a serial killer. Yet that's precisely what happened on a frigid February morning in Cedar Grove. Dawn broke with unforgiving coldness, seeping through the thin walls of the Subaru where Maggie had spent another restless night. She watched her breath form delicate clouds in the air, listening to her daughter Sophie's gentle breathing from the reclined passenger seat. The 14-year-old slept peacefully, dark hair framing a face caught between childhood and adolescence. 4 months. 4 months since they'd lost the Victorian house with the wraparound porch, where Sophie had measured her growing height against the kitchen door frame. 4 months since James had cleared out their bank account and disappeared with his 26-year-old secretary, leaving behind only a note and the crushing medical debt from Maggie's heart surgery. 4 months of shelter hopping until they'd finally resorted to the Subaru. Maggie gently brushed a strand of hair from Sophie's face. Despite everything, her daughter still maintained her passion for astronomy, a love nurtured by James before he became someone Maggie no longer recognized, before he walked away from 15 years of marriage as easily as shedding an unwanted coat. "I promise we won't live like this forever," Maggie whispered, though Sophie couldn't hear. "Today will be different." She reached for the newspaper folded in the center console, her finger tracing the circled advertisement for a storage unit auction in Westfield. Their last $342 felt heavy in her pocket, a desperate gamble, but desperation had become their constant companion. Have you ever wondered if you could overcome seemingly impossible challenges? Take a moment to reflect on that, and if you're listening somewhere quiet, let me know in the comments. You'll pick me up at 4, right? Sophie adjusted her backpack, standing on the library steps. The building offered warmth, Wi-Fi, and a sense of normalcy, a place where Sophie could pretend their life hadn't imploded. 4 o'clock sharp, Maggie confirmed. And Sophie, I'm going to find something wonderful today. I can feel it. Sophie offered a half smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. Good luck, Mom. As Maggie pulled into the sprawling concrete lot of Westfield Storage Solutions, a fine drizzle began to fall, perfect weather for rock bottom. She clutched her purse close, mentally counting the money inside for the third time. The auction crowd huddled beneath the facility's metal awning. About 20 people, mostly middle-aged men in work clothes clutching clipboards and coffee cups. Professional buyers with trucks and contacts, people who knew what they were doing. First-timer? Maggie turned to find an elegant elderly woman standing beside her. Despite the dismal weather, she wore a tailored burgundy coat and pearl earrings. Is it that obvious? Maggie attempted a smile. I'm Eleanor. Been doing these auctions for 20 years. The woman extended a hand adorned with a vintage silver ring. Don't bid on the first unit. Newbies always overbid because they're nervous. Thank you. I'm Maggie. Hunting storage units saved me after Harold passed, Eleanor confided. 47 years together, then one day, just gone. I found purpose in giving forgotten things new homes. Perhaps you will too. The auctioneer arrived, a balding man with a booming voice that cut through both the rain and the crowd's murmuring. He explained the rules. Winning bidders had 24 hours to clear units, all sales final, cash only. By the time they reached Unit 213, Maggie was soaked and shivering despite her raincoat. The auctioneer unlocked the padlock and rolled up the metal door with a clatter that echoed through the facility. The smell hit them first, musty and damp with undertones of mildew. Unit 213, folks, 10 by 15, abandoned after 8 months of non-payment. Unlike the previous units, this one appeared haphazard, as if packed in a hurry. A water-damaged sofa listed to one side, cardboard boxes, some collapsed from moisture, a wooden dresser with peeling veneer, plastic tarps covered unidentifiable lumps. But then, in the back corner, something caught Maggie's eye. The curved metal tube of a telescope on a tripod, partially hidden behind a tarp. A telescope like the ones James used to restore for Sophie on weekends. The two of them huddled together in the backyard, mapping constellations until well past Sophie's bedtime. Starting bid at $250, the auctioneer called. Do I have $250? Silence. The professional buyers were already turning away, mentally moving on to the next unit. $200 then? Surely I've got $200 for this unit. More silence. 150? Come on, folks. There's good stuff in here. $100, called a voice from the back. Maggie turned to see a sharply dressed figure standing apart from the crowd, tall with close-cropped dark hair and an expensive-looking raincoat. His eyes were cold, calculating, assessing the unit with unsettling intensity. $100 from the gentleman. Do I have $120? $120, Maggie heard herself say, her voice stronger than she felt. The man in the back narrowed his eyes. $140. $160, Maggie countered, her heart racing, each bid taking her closer to emptying their meager savings. The back and forth continued. Each time Maggie bid, the man immediately countered. By the time they reached $300, her hands were trembling. $300 from the lady. Do I have $320? The man paused, his dark eyes studying Maggie with unsettling intensity. Then unexpectedly, he shook his head and stepped back. Going once at $300. Going twice. Maggie held her breath. Last call at $300. No one moved. Sold to the lady for $300. Relief and terror flooded Maggie simultaneously. What had she done? $300. Almost everything they had for a unit full of moldy furniture and one glimpse of a telescope that might not even work. As she approached the auctioneer to complete the paperwork, Maggie noticed from the corner of her eye the well-dressed man speaking quietly into a cell phone, his gaze fixed on her. She caught fragments of his conversation. Following to see where she takes it. The words sent a chill down her spine. By the time the final unit was sold, the rain had stopped, though heavy clouds still threatened above. Maggie sat in her car, key in the ignition, and called the local U-Haul. As suspected, even the smallest rental truck was beyond her remaining budget. She tried 2 moving companies with the same result. Finally, she called 3 different charity organizations, hoping one might clear the unit in exchange for donated items. All were booked solid for weeks. Outside, darkness was falling early, as it often did during winter storms. Maggie checked the time. 3:01 p.m. She needed to pick up Sophie soon. What could she say? Sorry, honey. I spent our money on a pile of junk because I saw a telescope that reminded me of your father. Maggie rested her forehead against the steering wheel. They couldn't afford a motel tonight. They couldn't even afford dinner. And now they couldn't clear the storage unit that had consumed their emergency fund. Unless, she lifted her head, an idea forming, desperate, possibly illegal, but born of true desperation. She drove back to the main office of the storage facility. I'm wondering, she asked the young man at the desk, if I could possibly stay in my unit overnight. Just tonight. I'm waiting on a moving truck tomorrow, but with the storm... The clerk looked uncomfortable. That's against facility policy, ma'am. No one's supposed to be on the premises after 9 p.m. Please. Maggie lowered her voice. My daughter and I, we don't have anywhere else tonight. Just this once. He glanced around, then leaned forward. Security does rounds at 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. They don't check inside units if they're locked. He held her gaze. Just be gone by 8 a.m. when the morning shift starts. Thank you, Maggie whispered, her dignity another casualty of their circumstances. Together, Maggie and Sophie explored their temporary shelter, moving cautiously through the darkness. The sofa, despite its water damage, had a dry spot large enough for one person. Some of the boxes contained clothing that, while musty, could serve as additional insulation against the February chill. And there in the back corner stood the telescope, a Celestron Star Seeker according to its worn label. Sophie approached it reverently, running her fingers along the optical tube. It would take parts we can't afford to get it working again, Sophie said after examining it closely, her voice holding the disappointment she was trying to hide. I'm sorry, Sophie. I thought... It's okay, Mom, Sophie interrupted. It was a good thought. She continued exploring, moving deeper into the unit. While Maggie arranged their makeshift sleeping areas, the sofa for Sophie, a nest of relatively clean clothing for herself on the concrete floor. "Hey, Mom," Sophie called from the back corner. "There's furniture back here, too. An old dresser." Maggie joined her, aiming her flashlight. Unlike most of the unit's contents, it appeared to be an antique, though its value had been diminished by water stains in a missing drawer. "That's weird," Sophie said, running her fingers along the wooden panel. "It feels different here." Maggie looked where Sophie was pointing. The back panel of the dresser had a section that seemed slightly recessed, the wood grain not quite matching the surrounding area. "It might be a false back," Maggie said. "Some old dressers had hidden compartments." They worked together, fingers probing the edges of the panel until they found a small indentation. When Sophie pressed it, a section of the wood gave way with a soft click, revealing a shallow compartment. Inside was a metal lock box, roughly the size of a hardcover book. "Whoa," Sophie breathed, her flashlight beam fixed on their discovery. After several minutes of effort with Sophie's multi-tool, the lock gave way with a sharp snap. Together they opened the box. The flashlight beam illuminated the contents, and Maggie felt her breath catch in her throat. Inside, neatly arranged, were several items that seemed wildly out of place in an abandoned storage unit. A worn leather notebook, its pages visibly filled with handwritten entries. A thick stack of cash, old bills wrapped in plastic and secured with rubber bands. Several newspaper clippings, yellowed with age. A handful of Polaroid photographs, face down, and a small black USB drive. "Is that money?" Sophie whispered. Maggie carefully lifted the stack of bills. $60,000, she said, her voice barely audible. $60,000, Sophie repeated. "Mom, that would solve everything." Maggie set the money aside and picked up the leather notebook. She opened it to a random page and angled her flashlight to read the neat, precise handwriting. Galloway, 125K initial, 30K completion. Client satisfied, body never recovered. A chill ran down Maggie's spine. She flipped through more pages, finding similar entries. Names, amounts, cryptic notes about completion and disposal. Some entries had small red X marks beside them. She turned to the Polaroids next, steeling herself before flipping one over. It showed a middle-aged man standing outside what appeared to be a warehouse. Nothing overtly sinister except for the red X drawn across his face. The next photo showed a young woman entering an apartment building. Another red X, photo after photo. "Mom!" Sophie's voice seemed to come from far away. "What is it?" "These are records of hits," Sophie finished, her voice small. "Like hired killings." "I think so." She continued examining the contents, finding financial spreadsheets on the USB drive when Sophie plugged it into her tablet. The documents showed money moving between various businesses and offshore accounts. One name appeared repeatedly throughout: Richard Harrington. "I know that name," Maggie murmured. "He's some kind of real estate developer. I've seen billboards with his company logo." The storage unit suddenly felt colder. They weren't just trespassing in an abandoned space. They were sitting amidst evidence of multiple murders. "We need to get out of here," Maggie said, her mind racing. "What about the money?" Sophie asked. Maggie looked at her daughter directly. "Sophie, listen to me. This money was paid to kill people. The people in these photographs. We can't take it. We can't build our happiness on other people's pain and death. Sometimes the right decisions put us in the most danger. Do you agree? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to the channel if you want to know what Maggie and Sophie will do next." The next morning, they slipped out just as the first employees were arriving, managing to exit the facility without drawing attention. At a nearby diner, they treated themselves to a proper breakfast. "What now?" Sophie asked, voice low despite the classic rock playing over the diner speakers. "We need to find a way to contact the police anonymously, at least at first," Maggie explained. "I don't want us immediately connected to this. The people involved are clearly dangerous. They drove to a shopping center several miles away, searching for a payphone. Maggie finally found one outside a laundromat. "Wait in the car," she told Sophie. "Keep an eye out. If you see anyone suspicious, especially that man from the auction, honk the horn 3 times." When the dispatcher answered, Maggie took a deep breath. "I need to report something sensitive," she began. "I recently acquired a storage unit at auction, and I found evidence of what I believe to be multiple crimes, possibly murders." After explaining the contents of the lockbox, the dispatcher connected her directly to the Major Crimes Unit. "This is Detective Diana Castillo. I understand you have information regarding Richard Harrington." Maggie repeated her discovery, adding a few more details about the notebook entries. "Don't move," Castillo said after getting Maggie's location. "My partner and I will be there in 20 minutes. Don't speak to anyone else, and don't let those materials out of your sight." They waited, the minutes crawling by. Maggie kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the well-dressed man from the auction approaching. Instead, after exactly 19 minutes, an unmarked sedan pulled into the parking lot, and 2 people emerged. They approached the Subaru directly, and the woman held up a badge. "Detective Diana Castillo, Westfield PD. This is my partner, Detective Jake Miller. Are you the caller regarding the storage unit evidence?" As the detectives looked through the evidence, Maggie noticed a subtle shift in Detective Castillo's demeanor. When they reached the Polaroid photographs, the detective paused on one image, her expression briefly flashing with something that looked like recognition, or was it pain, before returning to its professional mask. "Mrs. Walker," Castillo said after they had examined everything, "this is extremely serious evidence. We'll need you and your daughter to come with us to the station to make formal statements." "Are we in trouble?" Sophie asked. "No, you did the right thing bringing this to us," Castillo assured her. "But we need to know exactly how you came into possession of these items, and we need to ensure your safety." "Our safety?" Maggie echoed. "If what you found is authentic," Castillo said carefully, "it implicates people who wouldn't hesitate to eliminate potential witnesses. Until we can verify these materials and determine next steps, we'd like you both under police protection." As they prepared to follow the detectives to the station, Maggie glanced across the parking lot and froze. There, standing beside a black SUV with tinted windows, was the well-dressed man from the auction. "Detective," Maggie said, "that man over there, he was at the auction yesterday. He bid against me for the storage unit." Castillo followed her gaze, but the man was already sliding into the SUV. "Miller, get the plate," she ordered sharply. But the SUV was already pulling away, its license plate obscured by what appeared to be road grime. "We need to move," Castillo said, her voice tense. "Now." After a thorough interview at the police station, Detective Castillo revealed a personal connection to the case. She reached into her jacket and removed a photograph of a smiling young woman with dark hair like her own. "My sister Elena," she said softly. "She was an investigative journalist looking into Harrington's business dealings 12 years ago. She disappeared. The official police report listed her as a missing person, possibly having left the country voluntarily. You never believed that?" "Never. I joined the force because of Elena, worked my way up to Major Crimes, spent 12 years trying to find out what happened to her." Castillo tucked the photo away. "I tell you this because I want you to understand that I am completely committed to bringing Harrington down. Not just professionally, but personally. I will do everything in my power to keep you and your daughter safe." Later, at a nondescript motel where they were placed under protection, Castillo shared more disturbing news. "We've analyzed this area in the background," she said, pointing to a location in one of the Polaroids, then comparing it to a photo of her sister. "We believe it's the same location, a property owned by one of Harrington's shell companies near the old industrial district." "What are you saying?" "I believe this might be where Elena and possibly others were disposed of." "There's one more thing," Castillo continued. "We've located Robert Mills, a dock worker who was presumed dead after a warehouse accident in 2005. Turns out he survived and has been living under an assumed name in Pennsylvania. He might be willing to testify." On the fourth day, a woman Maggie didn't recognize appeared at their motel door. Asian, in her mid-30s, with a press badge. "Mrs. Walker, I'm Lauren Chen with the Westfield Gazette. I was hoping to speak with you about the evidence you found in Storage Unit 213. After confirming with Detective Castillo that she knew Chen, Maggie allowed the journalist inside. "Richard Harrington has been untouchable for decades," Chen explained. "Even with the evidence you found, there's a significant risk that he'll evade justice through legal maneuvering or by leveraging his political connections. So what are you proposing?" "A carefully timed expose. I've been investigating Harrington for years. With your evidence added to what I already have, we could publish a comprehensive story detailing Harrington's crimes. Once it's public, it becomes much harder for his allies to make the case disappear." That night, after receiving a text from Castillo warning that another officer linked to Harrington had been discovered in the department, Maggie spotted a black SUV slowly circling the motel parking lot. Their location was compromised. She called Chen immediately. "We'll work with you, but I have conditions. Sophie's safety comes first, always, and we remain anonymous in the article, at least until arrests are made." The next morning, as they hurried to evacuate to a new safe house, Vincent Reed, the man from the auction, attacked. In the chaotic shootout and escape that followed, Maggie and Sophie were separated from Castillo, escaping with Detective Miller. At a remote cabin, they eventually reunited with Castillo, who had only suffered a minor arm wound. The surprising news came shortly after. Vincent Reed had been arrested after a routine traffic stop. At the precinct, through one-way glass, Maggie watched as Castillo interrogated Reed. Tomorrow morning, the Westfield Gazette will publish an expose detailing Harrington's organization, including evidence from the storage unit. Simultaneously, we'll be executing arrest warrants for Harrington and several of his associates. By this time tomorrow, the entire operation will be exposed. "You lit a fuse," Reed said quietly, "but Harrington was just one head of the Hydra." "Meaning what?" "Meaning this goes deeper than you realize. Higher than you can reach." His gaze shifted to the one-way glass, seeming to lock directly on Maggie despite not being able to see her. "Tell the woman from the storage unit she made a choice that can't be unmade." As the detectives exited, Maggie saw something in Reed's eyes that disturbed her, a certainty that despite his current circumstances, he still held cards they couldn't see. The next day, Lauren Chen's expose was published. Arrest warrants were executed for Harrington and his associates, and national media descended on the story. But in a devastating setback, Robert Mills suddenly recanted his testimony, claiming his family had been threatened. With the case in jeopardy, Maggie made a dangerous decision. Remembering the location Castillo had identified in the photograph, she slipped away from protection one night and went to investigate herself. At the abandoned property, using only her flashlight and determination, Maggie discovered disturbed earth near an old shed. After hours of careful digging, she uncovered a hidden underground storage container. Inside were additional evidence files and, most significantly, human remains that would later be identified as Elena Castillo and other victims. This discovery provided the physical evidence needed to secure the case. In the preliminary hearings that followed, his defense team tried to discredit Maggie as a desperate homeless woman looking for attention and questioned the admissibility of the evidence. But Robert Mills, emboldened by the new evidence, and with his family now under federal protection, returned to testify. "I heard Mr. Harrington give the order directly," he stated. He said, "Make sure he has an accident, a permanent one." Mills described his escape from a burning vehicle, knowing immediately it was no accident. The hearings continued for 3 more days, with financial experts testifying about the money laundering operation documented on the USB drive, forensic specialists confirming the authenticity of the notebook entries, and police witnesses describing the pattern of suspicious deaths that matched the Polaroid photographs from the lockbox. "It's a win," Castillo told Maggie and Sophie after the judge ruled to proceed with the trial. "A big one. The judge didn't throw out any of the evidence, which means the prosecution's case remains intact." After the verdict found Harrington guilty on all major counts and sentenced him to 35 years in prison, Maggie and Sophie faced another decision, whether to enter the witness security program. It would mean a completely fresh start, Castillo explained. New names, new location, new schools for Sophie. Would I still be able to study astronomy? Sophie asked. The program isn't designed to erase who you are, just to protect you from those who might wish you harm. After careful consideration, they accepted. Maggie became Marie Clark, Sophie became Emma, and they relocated to a small town in Vermont. 9 months later, Marie stood on the porch of their comfortable house watching the sunset. She had found fulfilling work at a nonprofit organization, helping women escape domestic violence, where her personal experience with upheaval and resilience made her particularly effective with clients. Emma had joined her high school's astronomy club and made several close friends who shared her passion for stargazing. Aunt Helen, Emma called as Diana Castillo, now known to neighbors as Helen, arrived for one of her twice-yearly visits. After dinner, Castillo presented a special surprise, the telescope from Storage Unit 213, now fully restored. You fixed it, Emma breathed, running her fingers reverently over the optical tube. I had help, Castillo admitted. A colleague's husband does this kind of work as a hobby. I thought, I thought you deserved something from your past that wasn't painful. That night after Castillo had left, Emma set up the telescope in their backyard, calibrating it with practiced hands. Mom, she called excitedly, come look at this. Marie joined her daughter in the cool evening air, wrapping a cardigan around her shoulders. Bennett's Comet, Emma explained, stepping back from the eyepiece. It only passes Earth every 75 years. Dad told me about it once. Said I might see it someday if I was lucky. Marie leaned down to look through the telescope. There it was, a faint smudge of light with a ghostly tail streaking across the black canvas of space, traveling silently on its long journey. Remember what Dad used to say? Emma asked, her voice soft. The stars are always there, even when clouds cover them. Yes, Marie replied, putting her arm around her daughter's shoulders. And so are we, no matter what names we use or where we live. They stood together watching the night sky, two figures illuminated by starlight. Despite everything they had endured, the loss, the fear, the upheaval, they had found their way back to stability, to safety, to each other. Later, after Emma had gone to bed, Marie sat alone on the porch with a blank notebook open on her lap. The night was clear, stars scattered across the darkness in familiar patterns. She began to write their story, not of crimes or killings, but of resilience and courage, of a mother and daughter who faced impossible odds together and emerged stronger. It began, the stars are always there, even when clouds cover them. As she wrote, Marie felt a sense of reclamation. Their past hadn't been erased by their new identities. It had been transformed, integrated into who they were becoming, like the restored telescope, like the new home they had built, like the relationships they were forming in this community. The nonprofit work had introduced her to Sarah, another single mother who had become a close friend and confidant. Emma's astronomy club had given her a circle of like-minded peers who valued her knowledge and enthusiasm. Even their elderly neighbor, Mr. Patterson, had become part of their chosen family, often joining them for Sunday dinners and sharing stories from his own remarkable life. Tomorrow would bring new pages to fill, new stars to observe, new stories to write, and they would face it together, just as they had faced everything else, with courage, with integrity, and with an unbreakable love.